Here's an idea. When you do your quarterly business review, when you do your performance reviews, maybe the number one thing you talk about first, before you talk about, did you hit your sales numbers? How are you developing your team? You are in a leadership position. You're not in a solo contributor position. You're in a leadership position.
Welcome to the Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today, I'm looking forward to a great discussion with Harry Travis about our responsibility as leaders to train and develop our bench, those who will replace us. Harry holds a bachelor's in pharmacy from the University of Pittsburgh and an MBA from the University of Virginia. He's held multiple senior leadership positions with Baxter Healthcare, Cardinal Health, Accredo, Medco, and Aetna. He was the president and CEO of etectRx Incorporated, a digital health startup, and then joined CVS Caremark as the senior vice president, member services operations, where he led over 20,000 associates serving over 110 million enrollees nationwide. Now, he's the president of the Travis Group, where he provides strategic consulting and executive coaching. And I had the opportunity to meet and get to know Harry when we were classmates in an executive leadership coaching training program at Brown University. Harry, great to see you. Thanks for being on the Science of Leadership.
Hi, Tom. It's great to see you too. Happy to be here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Well, let's get right into this topic today because it's one of paramount importance for great leadership. And it's something that would-be leaders consistently fail to do: identify, train, and develop their bench, those people who will replace them. So a question I have for you is, what are your thoughts on the importance of identifying those people, developing them in their current roles, and preparing them for one day taking on greater leadership? And perhaps we could break those into individual questions if needed.
Yeah, it is a real important task, role of a leader to develop your bench. I think about all of the various positions I've had in the various companies I've been in. And as I was thinking about this, in any leadership position in any organization, you've got all sorts of goals and metrics that you've got to achieve. And mostly those are easily quantifiable. Are they sales goals? Are they return on investment goals? Are they expense goals or project deliverables or things like that? But training your team and developing your bench, as you say, is also just as important as all of those business goals, but highly subjective and not easy to measure. So I think one of the challenges here is to make that as important as everything else, but figure out ways of measuring it and talking about it in quarterly reviews and business reviews and performance reviews, where it's not easy to just kind of push it to the last item on the agenda.
Yeah. So following on that, Harry, what do you think about the actual preparation of those people and the importance of that? And how do you see that as being, I guess, intrinsic, if you will, to leadership?
Yeah, well, I think about the people that I've had report to me and my role in developing them as leaders, and then evaluating their roles in developing their bench, right? And in simple terms, I think about it in terms of kind of skills and content, or what you know. Do you know the things that it's kind of the tactics of the job? Do you understand the market? Do you understand the expenses? Do you understand the mechanisms of the business? Okay. Kind of the hardcore knowledge of the business. And then what you might call the soft side, the skills side. Okay. Are you trustworthy? Are you, building a team of trust in the organization? How are your communication skills? The skills that are transferable to any business versus the knowledge that is specific to the business. I'm a pharmacist. I've spent, 30 years in the pharmacy healthcare business. So, we look to hire people who understand drug distribution channels or drug insurance or how drugs are used, or that sort of thing. But then you're also looking for great communicators, great quote unquote leaders, people who just have the ability to command a room. And you're always looking for the balance of those two. I think it is easier for a leader or a department manager or a director or a vice president to kind of lean on the parts of their team that are easy to measure. Do they understand the market? Can they sell product, things like that, versus have they developed trust in the organization, and how do I measure that? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So, developing your bench is developing the awareness within yourself and the awareness in your leaders. And can you balance those two things that you're developing in the individual? The market knowledge, the technical skills, plus the soft side of leadership.
Yeah. Well, can you share a story that shows our listeners what it looks like to build the bench?
Well, I was thinking of, without naming names, I was thinking of an individual that reported to me when I was running a large pharmacy organization, and I had, different functions reporting to me: a finance and accounting function, a regulatory function, a sales organization, and an operations organization. As I think back, and as I was thinking about your question, person who was leading the operations function ultimately retired, and the succession into her position was absolutely seamless. And I thought back on it. I'm like, okay, why was that so smooth? Why did that work so smooth? And one of the things, as I thought back on it, was that individual, that leader, and we'll call her Mary. Mary was, all of my direct reports, Mary seemed to be the person that was most confident in herself and self-assured in her role, never seemed to be kind of flustered in any situation. And I think it was because she did the best job of delegating to her team as opposed to internalizing kind of the work requirements. I think about all of the other people that were reporting to me, at one point or another, they were kind of always on the point of, they were resolving the issue or they were managing the crisis. I can't recall a situation where Mary was that person. It was more Mary and her team. So, okay, this is going to sound overly simplistic, but maybe there's one rule here, that the best delegators are also the best developers of their team and their bench. And delegation of responsibilities is an indicator. It's a surrogate, something you look to in terms of, okay, how well are you developing your team? Is how well do you delegate work down? And thinking about the work you've done with generals and leaders, it was, I think, Mattis, his famous quote is, somebody asked them, do you have trouble sleeping at night? He goes, no, I don't have any trouble sleeping at night. I keep my people up. Or there was some derivative of that, right? It's my people who report to me that are up worrying all night long. I have no trouble sleeping. I'm like, I think that is a very good indicator of someone who's developing their team.
Yeah.
And then, the question is, okay, well, how are you helping that level that you're keeping up at night? Why can't you teach them to do the same thing that you're doing?
Yeah. I think you hit on something that's really imperative in developing our bench and helping the people that we're trying to build to replace us. That's give them batting practice. Right? I mean, when we are actively delegating and giving people opportunities to perform in those roles, we're giving them the chance to build those skills so that when the time comes, it's not batting practice anymore and they're standing in the batter's box in the game. They can hit the ball. They can do the job that they need to do. And
Right.
That's when you look at leadership development systems that have been shown to work, the things that really work first is personal investment in developing capabilities. Second is actually doing whatever it is that you're going to be doing as far as leadership, being in a position, given the opportunity. And so the delegation is that. And then third is mentoring. So I would say that Mary probably did at least two of those, in that she probably mentored those people, and she clearly delegated and gave them the opportunities to swing the bat before it was in the game.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Harry. I was wondering, as you were talking about, I asked about a time when it really worked. Do you have a story on the opposite end of that? That is, can you think of one where you saw a leader fail to train their replacement and that had significantly negative impacts?
I've seen that more than once, and I think the common theme, as I thought about it, and you were kind enough to give me an advance kind of look at the questions and think through this. The people that I've seen that haven't been able to develop their bench are this. I'm going to make generalizations here, so
Sure.
just be fair warned. Are more focused on themselves than the team. And it may be, and this is where whoever their boss is needs to step up. But if you have someone who is insecure in their leadership position, if you have someone who always feels, or you can see that they are the ones making the presentations or solving the problems, okay, that should be a big red warning flag. If somebody isn't comfortable enough in their own role and their position that they can't highlight the work of their team below, is going to be a problem. A lot of times people are in positions get created or succession events occur that are not planned. Somebody gets sick.
Sure.
Somebody takes another job, that sort of thing. It's not like all of these successions are well thought out and well planned in advance. So if you as a leader are sitting there thinking, okay, I've got somebody working for me who isn't doing a good job of developing their team, well, I've got time to work on them. Well, maybe you don't, because
Right.
who knows what could happen. There could be a management shakeup and you need to take out a layer of management. All of a sudden, oh my heavens. Okay. So this just gets back to what we said at the very beginning, that in today's environment where there's so much turbulence in the workforce and in corporations, succession planning and developing your bench, like I said, should be at the top of the list of priorities. Okay, so here's an idea. When you do your quarterly business review, when you do your performance reviews, maybe the number one thing you talk about first, before you talk about, did you hit your sales numbers? It's how are you developing your team?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we'll go through the easy stuff, the quantifiable stuff. But first, we'll talk about how are you developing it, because you are in a leadership position. You're not in a solo contributor position. You're in a leadership position.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where I've seen it fail is people who are leaders who are more focused on, solely focused, excessively focused on hitting the numbers and having those numbers reflect on them. I did it. That it's the I, not the team. And then if all of a sudden they're taken out of that position, you got a bench that's not trained, that hasn't had batting practice, as you say.
Yeah. You said so many good things there. And one thing that caught me, I think great leaders build leaders. And folks have written about this. The level 5 leader is the person who is building the next group of leaders. And I'll, later in the episode, we'll get to a list of reasons why people fail to build their replacement. One that you hit on that's really important is this idea of longevity of the role of the current leader, that somehow they're just going to go on forever. And so we'll touch on that a little bit more a little bit later. But I think those things, just as you say, looking at the people when you're meeting with them to do performance reviews, things of that nature, to see what are they doing with regard to developing their people, to building up the next generation, to helping assure the longevity of their organization, their team, and the organization at large. I think, just as you say, that's fundamental. When I was interviewing several of the 4-star generals and admirals, that was a major point that they made. Taking the place of primacy, a leader's number one job is to figure out who it is that's going to replace them, and then start building that person from day one. And so you kind of resonated with that in the things that you were saying.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about with respect to this topic is just looking at, and I don't know if you want to spend a minute on this, just thinking about big industry examples of succession planning that have worked and not worked. Okay. Yeah. So think about tech. Okay. Microsoft. Bill Gates groomed Steve Ballmer to be his replacement. Kind of didn't work out, Yeah. But Ballmer then picks, Sundar Pichai to run, and that is universally viewed as a positive move. Okay. Now, whether Ballmer developed Pichai or not, I will give Microsoft and the board credit for promoting from within.
Yeah.
Similarly, Google, Eric Schmidt and then Sundar Pichai, right? If I got those names right, because I'm trying to remember if I got the Microsoft guy right, but you get the point. The Google CEO was internal. Okay. Apple, Steve Jobs, Tim Cook.
Yeah.
Now let's look at some healthcare examples. Look at Walgreens right now. And Walgreens is a storied company. Okay. And I've got friends there, and I wish them nothing but the best, but almost a complete management turnover at Walgreens. Okay. New CEO from the outside, all new executive management. What happened there? Why couldn't they build their own bench in that organization? I don't know, but there's an CVS a little bit the same way, or current CEO came up through the ranks, but massive turnover at the C-suite level, as opposed to growing from within.
Yeah.
And I think the financial results kind of indicate. I think you could do a big macro study of what organizations grow their own versus pull from outside, and can you look at an ROI and determine if the ROI looks better on organizations that do a really good job of, as you say, building their bench.
Yeah, there's certainly data people have studied on smaller scales, but people have studied success of external versus internal. So external hire versus internal promotion, and consistently the internal promotion tends to be more favorable. Is it possible that you can get an external hire and they will be able to do the job well? It is. It turns out that they don't perform as well as they did at their prior organization, and it tends to take 3 to 5 years before they actually achieve the same results as they were getting at the place they were before in most cases. So that there is definitely this trough, and that has to do with the fact that we're not able to assess, or we don't give credit to the fact this person is in an environment at this other place where they're doing well, and they're doing well because they're working with other people. They know the system. They have all these operations in place. And when they come to the new organization, they don't bring all that with them most of the time. And so as a result, they're not as successful. So yeah, I think that absolutely this idea of internal promotion versus external hire is a really important one for organizations to consider. And I think that from my perspective, it's kind of shameful if you're not building the people internally to promote. Some people have this, I'm going to say Yankees. I grew up a Yankees fan, even in the South, but I was a Yankees fan. But the Yankees have historically just bought the players. They haven't built their players. And so there's a lack of future thinking. It's immediate. We want to win the World Series this year, as opposed to thinking, what can we do to be perennial winners without spending, a treasury on that, build them from within. And so I think that organizations that don't have a robust program and system to develop their replacements are lacking fundamentally in leadership.
Right.
So,
I agree with you 100%.
Harry, I've just got to be honest here. I got to admit where I really messed this up royally earlier in my own career. I think just for the sake of demonstrating to our listeners kind of how this can look bad from a personal perspective. So in my first faculty position, I had the opportunity to build a couple of actually pretty successful clinical programs. One was for adults with congenital heart disease. So those are people who are born with abnormal hearts, and so they get some sort of most of the time intervention, surgery or so forth, and they grow up and they live with that. And so I grew the program for that. And then the other was one for kids and adults who have genetically mediated arterial problems as a result of changes in their body tissues, what we would call connective tissues and connective tissue disorders. And so put together this connective tissue disorder program. And it was really a good program. I mean, it was non-existent. And so we started that. We were able to draw patients from other states and even across the country in a number of cases, which was not a common thing for the cardiac program there where I was. But the problem was it all hinged on me. Maybe I was hopeful, ignorant. I'm not sure that it didn't hinge on me, that I wasn't as important or something. And so when I was recruited to Stanford to build a bigger and better iteration of that first one folded. It totally ceased to exist. As soon as I left, it was like a switch was turned off. And that is a tremendous failure on my part. I didn't think about the need to train my replacement, at least not until it was too late. I never gave someone else the opportunity to get in there and build that expertise, to lead and to continue the program. And fundamentally, I let down the cardiology division and the hospital, but most of all, I failed those patients and families. And that is an indictment on me. Now, I will say there's a happy ending to some degree. I'm happy to report that I learned from it and I corrected it. So when I was being recruited to move to Stanford, I repeatedly told them that it was my goal to build, air quotes, a plug and play program. And that was the term I kept using so that they would understand that I was interested in the continued success of the program, and that continued success not being contingent on Tom Collins being there or not. And I was able to do that. Part of that was because I went there. Again, I went there with the expectation that it wasn't going to be a forever position. When I was going there, I asked the surgeon, how long are you going to be operating? He said 5 years. Looked at our family, 5 years from that point, my daughter would be graduating high school. My son would be about to start high school. Okay, 5 years. I'll work with this surgeon 5 years and we'll be done. Okay. And so my target was, we'll be here 5 years. And I told him that from the outset, straight on. And so I think that was beneficial, in addition to the fact that I came there saying, I'm not going to make that mistake again. So I had that limited time horizon that I didn't think of in the first position. And having that, I just started thinking about it differently, and it kept me focused on keeping the program successful over the long term. And as a result, I was able to identify and work with several potential successors, and found one, was able to train her, she's a phenomenal, I refer to her as my protege, and she's now leading that program exceptionally well. And I can't tell you how much satisfaction and fulfillment that I've gotten from helping her build her career in that way, and then watching her soar. And additionally, I know the program's in great hands with a bright future. So I screwed it up royally at the first place, but I learned from it and was able to enact a different plan in the second place. And it's one that I'm tremendously proud of in that regard. So.
Yeah, listening to you, I think there's something else that's important that you did in the second program at Stanford, and that is you made your goals public. I'm going to make this a plug and play, and it sounds like you told everybody that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing to have a goal. It's another thing to publicize it and essentially put your metric out there for everybody to measure you against it. And it gives you, an added incentive. Okay. If I miss this, everybody's going to know I miss it, as opposed to, well, I haven't told everybody that I'm going to do it this way. So therefore, if I don't pull it off, no one's really going to know that I failed. So I think that public aspect of making that, job number one, and making it public is real important to this building your bench, goal.
Yeah. That's a valuable insight, and it's true. I think folks have done research on all sorts of things. If you tell other people, I'm going to start a podcast, or I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to do whatever.
Right.
If you write that down, you publicize that to people, then you feel this social pressure to live that out, and it's helpful. So I think you're right on that. That brings up another question. Since this issue of failing to train the bench seems to happen commonly in all sorts of organizations, what do you think are the drivers of it?
I think it is the organization not culturally making it kind of part of the fabric of the organization. Mm-hmm. You hear organizations say, we're a sales-driven organization, we're an innovation-driven organization, we're a Six Sigma organization, that sort of thing. You rarely do you hear an organization talk about boldly and publicly about how we're a developer of people. If you go back maybe 20 years I was reading an article about, the glory days of GE.
Yeah.
When they had their executive development center in Croton, Connecticut. People who grew up in that GE management structure, it was better than a Harvard MBA. And GE really put that out there. There aren't many companies that are doing that anymore.
Yeah. That actually segues really well into some of the things that researchers have investigated on this. And so it turns out there have been a lot of studies on this, and they've looked into why leaders fail to train their replacements. And I don't want to dwell on the negatives too long, mm-hmm. Because I'd rather focus on ways to make it sure that we train our replacements. But I will give you and our listeners 8 reasons that scientists have identified for why leaders fail to train their replacements. And as always, I'll include references in the show notes and in the description. But number 1, fear of being replaced. People think if they train someone who's superb and somebody that has a lot of energy, perhaps because they're younger or whatever, they can be replaced. And so as a result, they don't train those people. Number two, and we've hit on this a little bit, ego and identity are tied to the leadership position. A lot of folks want to think they're irreplaceable. So you see that a lot in company founders and big name CEOs. I think you see that very frequently. Third is a lack of time and resources. They think they're just too busy, not understanding that the critical nature of training a replacement is, again, crucial. We've already touched on that. The fourth one is perceived lack of suitable candidates. I think this is honestly tied to the second one, which was about ego, right? They look around themselves and they think they're really great. They think so highly of themselves that they simply can't envision somebody who could do the job as well as they can. And so they don't bother with it. The fifth is, and you just nailed this one, organizational culture. Some organizations, and I would say they're the ones with limited futures, don't have a culture of training people to assume leadership positions. The sixth one, misaligned incentives that are directed towards short-term performance. And I think that reflects the mentality of who cares about the future. We're only after the shareholders for this quarter, right? Number seven is unclear understanding of transition planning. I think that many people don't train their replacement because they simply don't know how or understand that it's needed. There's no system in place to do it. And the final one is, and we hit this one earlier a little bit, overconfidence in personal longevity. And we see this in medicine all the time. People can see the mortality risk of others who have diabetes or heart disease or cancer or whatever it may be. They can look at somebody and say, that person shouldn't be smoking as they're lighting up a cigarette because they think for some reason it's not going to affect them. They're not going to be the ones who get cancer or whatever it may be. They're going to be able to beat it. And I think it's the same with leaders who don't recognize that none of us are getting out of this life alive. So I think those are the 8 things, and so you've touched on a few, but any of those others that I brought up strike a chord with you, Harry?
As I listen to those, one of the thoughts that comes to mind is as a leader is talking to their potential replacements and you're working with your team, performance appraisals and things like that. I think the challenge is to really understand what are the personal goals of the people who report to you, your future leader, and really talk to them and understand what are their goals. Not everybody wants to be you. Not everybody.
Sure.
Yeah. And you should have a candid conversation with everybody about that, because oftentimes you're just assuming everybody wants to move up one rung on a ladder. That may not be the case. And being able to have a candid conversation when somebody says, yeah, I do want to get ahead. Okay, well, can you have the conversation with that individual about, okay, what you're lacking and what you don't have? But I think it starts with an honest communication one-on-one between you and the person, your subordinate. What are your personal goals? And can I, as a leader, align your personal goals to my development program or skills with you?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you've hit on something that's really important, fundamentally important, is the idea of figuring out what the other people want. I've certainly, in my career, when I was trying to identify somebody to train up and replace me, there were people that weren't interested in it. And so if that's the case, it does you no good and does them no good to try to force it. So find the people that do have interest. Studies have shown with regard to leadership that a desire to be a leader is actually important in being a good leader. And so trying to foist that upon somebody is a bad idea. So we hit on 8 negatives there. But I'd like to shift to, again, the reasons, or at least 3 reasons why we need to be training our replacements. If I can share those with you. It's pretty clear from the scientific leadership literature that Leaders who prioritize identifying and developing their replacements are not only demonstrating strong leadership, but are also contributing to the long-term stability and success of their organization. I touched that a minute ago. Building that bench, or what we might call succession planning, that tends to be more commonly used term, is valuable in several crucial ways. Again, highlighting three of those. First, it prioritizes organizational stability and continuity. Developing your replacement ensures someone is ready to step in when needed, which leads to smoother transitions, reduces operational disruptions, and maintains institutional knowledge. By building those replacements and giving them the training and opportunities to take on bigger roles, you create a strategic advantage for your organization. Those people you're developing become more capable, they start exercising that capability, and research shows that they adapt more quickly to change and are able to maintain operational consistency. And so the third thing I'll mention is that training on replacement creates a culture of professional development, empowerment, and mentorship. When we do those things, we not only have much more capability in our people in the organization, but we also create a system that propagates into the future, creating sustained leadership longevity. So those are three major advantages to training up our replacements. So, Harry, we've covered a lot today, but the final question I have for you is, how can we make this practical for our listeners? How have you done this in your career?
I'll give you one example that, when we touched on the topic of culture, and one of the organizations I worked, we had well over 100 supervisor positions, big organization, and we had at least 100 supervisors. Each supervisor had 15 to 20 different individuals, and the supervisor was the first line of management. And we decided at the beginning of one year to just declare that year the year of the supervisor. And, just broadcast that across the company, and with no real definition underneath it other than we'll figure it out as we go. But we just wanted to let the supervisors know how important they were. And it just energized the whole team, and it forced the organization to build more development tools, measuring tools to help the supervisors. Why? Because it was the year of the supervisor. And it was one of the things that I could do from high up in the organization by just making that declaration that kind of energized everybody around what is arguably the most important leadership position in the company, which is the first line supervisor. And if you believe you're going to promote from within, some of those supervisors may make it all the way to the top.
Mm-hmm. You just hit on something that's really fundamentally important, and that is the first line leader is imperative with regards to success of an organization. And that's been shown in a number of different studies as well. One thing that's clearly tied to it, and we'll have a guest on down the road, a friend of mine named Tate Shanafelt, who's a physician and is the world expert on physician burnout. And his work has shown that the capability of that first line leader is the thing that's most closely associated with preventing burnout and maintaining retention in an organization. So training those people, vitally important. As I think about the things that we could do practically, we've hit on so many of them, sort of to round those out. The first is have a mentality of developing your replacement. Recognize that is the mark of a great leader, that you're identifying and training your replacement. Number two, actually try to do that with more than one person, because you never know what's going to happen with your proteges, as it were. They may not work out. They may decide to leave. They may have a personal health crisis. There are so many different things that could prevent them from becoming the people that you're hoping them to be and the leaders that you're hoping. So you got to plan for that potentiality. The third thing is give them batting practice. Actually give them opportunities. You hit on this idea of delegating and giving them the ability to have a chance to, swing the bat and so forth. So I think that's one that's important. another thing that I don't necessarily think we hit on so much is to make it known to other people that this person is the person that you're training to take your place. I think that's vitally important as well. So those are some things that our folks can really do to try to develop their replacements. Well, Harry, as always, it's great to talk with you. Thanks again for being on Science of Leadership.
Thank you. And you're welcome. I had a great time. You're doing great work. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.